Hey, good evening, Niles. And thanks for joining us this evening for our live wine tasting with Wineseller. We have Lee. Boy, Lee, we should have talked about how to pronounce your last name.
Schlesinger.
Okay, there we go. We have Lee with us, and he is from Wineseller, and he is going to take us through our tasting. So, Lee, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks to the Niles Chamber of Commerce and Alicia. And I see we have some other people joining us in here. Anybody that's on Facebook land wants to join the conversation, we do have a StreamYard link if you want to get in. Otherwise, please feel free to type in the comment section any questions or comments that you have, and we'll be sure to answer anything that's up there. This is tasting number 2 that I've done with you, huh?
It is, yes.
And can't remember what we did the first time. Maybe just a pandemic-y kind of get together and talk about Wineseller as a business of Niles.
Yeah, I think, did we do diversity in wine? Did we do like so. 3 different countries maybe? I feel like that might have been it.
Yeah, we're going to have that theme again today, but we're going to tie it into something a little bit more business-wise. So I teased this on Facebook to my friends on Facebook and said, hey, I'm finally going to get to use my undergraduate degree. I was an economics undergrad major. I did get an MBA, so I use that all the time. But the undergrad economics is what we'll be applying here. And the topic that we were going to talk about was tariffs and tariffs specifically over the airplane dispute between Boeing and Airbus, and kind of the wine industry and other industries that are really collateral damage in this argument that goes back 20 odd years or so. But before we get there, maybe we can talk a little bit about Wineseller.
Yes, let me get okay, here we go.
All right, so Wineseller, these are some nice images. We were talking about how glamorous the wine industry is. Well, we put forth a pretty face, but really it's nitty gritty. I use my MBA in a lot of spreadsheets, and these kind of images are the highlights of the industry, should I say. We're going to talk about how this is an agricultural product, and we're really beholden to Mother Nature, and sometimes she's not so nice to us, and we'll talk about what's happening in France this past week when we get there. But some pretty images here for Wineseller. Next slide, we can talk maybe about what Wineseller is. Wineseller is a family. Well, first of all, we're based in Niles. We moved from Skokie to Niles. We love our new digs. They're Caldwell and Howard. We're at 7520 North Caldwell, so all the Caldwell people in the house. We're second-generation family-owned importer that goes back to about 1977. We've got about 35 employees. And what we do as an importer, we act as the commercial arm of a winery. So a winery that's based in France their core competency is to grow grapes and turn it into wine. And then realistically, the commercial side of the business is not something that, unless they have their own internal department, that they want to really deal with. A whole different set of functions. So we do accounts payable, accounts receivable as a singular entity here in the United States, doing business in all 50 states. We do marketing, PR, advertising, sales promotion, and then the really fancy stuff, the logistics and government compliance. Logistics has been a real nightmare lately, and maybe we'll even touch on that. We're talking about how all the ports are really clogged up, so any of us fellow importers out there are dealing with the same kind of woes that we are dealing with, super delays and higher costs, and just even almost an impossibility of booking containers getting into the U.S.
I know Christine's dealing with that. She's our president. She's on here this evening.
Yeah, tough for that. But we're gonna what we do at Wineseller is we build brands. So you've probably seen some of the brands out there. We represent a terrific Argentine winery called Santa Julia and their sister winery Zuccardi. And realistically, we're in 13 or 14 different countries representing other family-owned type of wineries. Relatively smaller brands. We're going to taste 3 things today. Hopefully, some people out there. How many people out there have wine that are with us there? Hopefully, some people have some wine.
Cool. Got their wine.
We're gonna get to that real quick because we're gonna need to wet our whistles here. But a little bit more about Wineseller. Very very market driven. We're innovative. We come out with, we were the first people to kind of enter the one of the first people to enter the Argentine wine category. We're always looking for opportunities out there. And we also are kind of leaders in different formats. So we've been selling wine in keg, wine in cans. We just launched a bag-in-a-box rosé for summertime drinking. So, you know, we're really market-driven kind of people. So that's a little bit about Wineseller's. Let's see what the next page has. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Wineseller's, you can follow us on all the socials. Our handle is at Winesellers Ltd, and our website is winesellersltd.com. And we'd love to have you follow us and stay connected to us on social media and websites. Our global portfolio, I said it's 13 countries. It kind of depends on the year. Sometimes we import from Luxembourg, sometimes not. But 73 odd wineries, 500 plus products, and sales pre-pandemic was around 800,000. We're looking for that million case magic number mark sometime soon. Here are some of our top brands. I mentioned some of them. And then our top wines, look for those maybe at your Binny's there in Niles. They stock quite a few of these things for us. So thanks. Another shout out to another Niles business. Before we jump into the first wine, maybe we can, Alicia, do you want to introduce some people and maybe let's generate some conversation?
Let me look at who we have here. So Jen and Steve are with us, although they don't have their camera on. Jen's a graphic designer in the chamber. Miranda and Jenny have joined us. Those are my daughters. Christine Pusateri is with us. She owns Pusateri Solutions in Niles, and she's also the president of the chamber. And then we have Pamela Lowe and Patrick Fahey, and they are with Professional Eye Care Center. And then Laura Herlo just joined us, and she is with Caldwell Bankers Realty. Is that right, Laura?
Right, correct.
Okay, excellent. So anybody should feel free. If you've got questions or comments along the way, just jump in.
Yeah, let's keep it conversational. Otherwise, it's a monologue for me. I threw up a map here of Europe. We're going to talk about, specifically, we're going to focus in on 3 countries, and they're the 3 countries that are involved with, that are host countries to Airbus. And that specifically is Spain, France, Germany, and the UK. We don't import wine from the UK, so we're going to talk about Spanish wine, French wine, and German wine. And so I just wanted to show this map of Europe to get to kind of acclimated to the regions. I'm a very map-driven geology type of guy. So we have some. The first wine we're gonna taste is a Spanish wine. I figured, some of this stuff. I put this in here because some of this stuff really applies to a lot of Europe. Winemaking originally coming to Spain around 1000 BC with the Phoenicians. That's a pretty Mediterranean type of story. The Romans then kind of took the handle of that and really spread winemaking from the Mediterranean inland. All the way up to the 50th parallel of Germany, where we'll taste a wine here. There's old Roman presses up in the area where this German wine is coming from. Spain, kind of obviously the Moors came in and they really kind of they didn't drink alcohol. Although an interesting little tidbit of fact is they were some of the first people to discover distillation. And they use that for medicinal purposes, not for recreational purposes. The Reconquista means the Spanish Catholics took back Spain and took back their winemaking heritage. And really, the wines were really exported. So I think the colonization of the Americas helped their industry because they were sending wine to the colonies. And really, a lot of the New World is influenced by Spanish winemaking and Spanish variety. And then I think we're going to talk a little, like Franco came along and he really kind of isolated Spain for many years until the 70s. And then I think after that, really the renaissance of Spanish wine took off. So the first wine we're going to taste, let's see, next slide, we'll see. It's a huge country. It's the most widely planted, at least used to be the most widely planted country with grapevines. They're in the top 3 wine producers. Spain, Italy, and France, kind of depending on the year, trade off that title. They have a lot of indigenous grape varieties. We're going to taste one of them today. Most of them are most of the grape growing is actually in the Spanish, the high plains of Spain, very continental, warm climate. We're going to taste a wine from the coast of Spain. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll see the map of Spain, and you're going to look at Portugal, and you're going to look at above Portugal this region called Galicia, and right on the Spanish-Portuguese border, it's separated by the Minho River, and that Minho River on the north side there is where we get wine called from Rias Baixas, which means the low rivers, which are formed by icebergs. Glaciers. Yes. Sorry. And it's what we're going to find there is a very, very Atlantic influenced climate. So cooler climate, wetter environment, and that cooler climate really can't ripen red grapes very well. So it's a white wine growing country or region. And that region really is home to a grape variety called Albarino. And let's see how many people have a show of hands on how many people have an Albarino. We have 1 hand, 2 hands there. So Albarino is kind of the grape of this area. And surprisingly, 25% of all their production is exported to the United States. So we may be more familiar with Albarino than most other countries in the world. But it's a crisp, clean, dry white that kind of shows peaches is my main flavor profile in there, but also some minerality, good acidity, and a superb match with, I think I recommended some soft cheeses. And if anybody, gets into some tapas, Spanish tapas is the perfect pairing with this kind of thing. So yeah, I see somebody, any kind of seafood is perfect. So cheers. Let's wet our whistles before we jump into this tariff thing.
Okay, cheers.
Let's get wet before we get dry. So let's scroll down and we'll take a look at some images here from the coast of Spain. So 100% Albarino from Rias Baixas. We talked about the Atlantic influence, cooler temperatures. Everything's harvested by hand. We have a picture of the vineyard, I think is the next slide here. We'll take a look at this particular wine comes from a single vineyard that's in a sub-region called O Rosal, which is directly on the opposite side of that Minho River from Portugal. You're actually looking into Portugal from this slope that it's highlighted in the bottom right there. Let's keep going and take a look at some other images here of the Spanish coastline. That bring you there. We can't travel there, so I'll visually bring you there. Let's pop into the next slide. And this is our food pairings, all that seafood, or just I put the sunshine in there, anything on the water. So get out on Lake Michigan, get on a boat, or get some seafood. Most Spanish restaurants, if you visit any Spanish restaurants, will have Albarino. It's a great summertime option for summer sipping and for lighter cuisine. So, any thoughts on the Albarino? Did anybody manage to find the Senda Verde? Or did we find? Yeah, we got a nod or two. Great.
So Jen's a fan. We have a fan.
Ooh, Jen likes this. Yay!
I do.
So
This is the one. This is the one we found. Whoops. Yeah.
Is that the Burgons?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a terrific wine too. Around the same price. This is a plus or minus $15 type retail wine. And the Burgons maybe a little bit more expensive, 18 or so.
Yeah, I think it was.
Another terrific example. And when I see that on a wine list, and I know the value that wine holds as well as the Senda Verde.
So I am not a white wine drinker, but this is actually quite tasty. Mm-hmm. And I could enjoy a glass of this out on the lake.
Yeah, really refreshing and bright, delicious stuff. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the wines that unfortunately we were hit with tariffs. So let's get into the tariff conversation, which it starts on the next slide. So here's our Airbus versus Boeing standoff. Our key players obviously are Boeing and Airbus and the WTO, World Trade Organization, that rules on a lot of trade disputes. It's a global NGO entity that manages international trade and can dictate. Everybody, if they all agree and they buy in, then the WTO has teeth. But you have to buy in order to have the WTO have any teeth. So we're dating back to 2004, where each side actually in the same year declared unfair subsidies in the form of mostly government grants. Eventually, it turns into tax breaks and all sorts. It gets really, really ugly. And it goes to the WTO finally ruling in 2008 that Airbus subsidies were in the prohibitive level, which is kind of their most serious level of misdoings. And then, it kind of goes back and forth. The WTO partially backs an EU countersuit in 2011, 2012. Both sides are saying that they're according to the WTO agreements, and both sides are saying that the other isn't. 2014, the EU launches a new case against the U.S. For Washington state tax breaks. Those were eventually repealed, but this thing got pretty nasty, which is why I have the ultimate fighters over here on our right. I think that's McGregor there. So what happens eventually is that the WTO in 2019 says that the United States has the right to impose $7.5 billion worth of penalties in the form of tariffs against EU products. And what do they choose? They choose EU products that, yes, there are airplane parts that are affected. So the U.S. puts, I think it's about 15% on airplane parts and related products, but they slap 25% tariff on non-related goods. And these non-related goods are things like what we're going to talk about today, wine, but it was also cheese. So any cheese heads out there, I saw some cheese being raised up there. Any European cheese or cheese that came out of those four countries, again, England, France, Spain, and Germany, those were taxed or tariffed at an additional 25%. And that tariff came in at customs when it cleared customs based upon the invoice that was declared at customs. So what does that really mean for us? Let's go ahead and hit the next slide. So I tried to make this as cute as possible to keep people's attention here, but it included wines, obviously, and France and Germany are two of the top three global producers of wine. It did not include certain categories. Sparkling wine was not taxed, so champagne was not affected. It's already pretty heavily taxed. So it wasn't affected with tariffs. Wine shipped in containers of 2+ liters were not affected. And wines over 14% alcohol were not affected. So the United States classifies wine into all sorts of different breakdowns. So it didn't touch these things. So we'll talk about what we did in reaction, but what that really did to the wines that were taxed is it translated through what we call the 3-tier system: the importer, the distributor, and eventually the retailer. Each one of these people making margin generally after that tariff was imposed is magnified so that a $10 wine becomes about a $12 wine, and a $20 wine jumps to about 24, 30 to 37. So you can see about a 20% increase at retail there easily, depending on where we are in terms of price point.
And don't tell me, but amazingly enough, nobody cared about the English wine. Amazingly enough.
Well, here's the thing. Most English wine is sparkling wine, and it wasn't really affected because they didn't tax sparkling wine. So England kind of dodged the bullet on that. But what France and England did get hit with, especially England, were leather goods and clothing, and then high fashion items, like Chanel bags and things like this. So France got nailed with that. And then I think, like leather goods out of England were some of the things that got hit from their side. But yeah, not a lot of still English wine. So what did we do as a business, and what did other businesses do? These are some of the reactions that we took for sure, until we get to the last one. We cut margins throughout the entire supply chain. So Wineseller as a company working with our wineries in France and Spain and Germany, we said, hey guys, we're going to have tariffs. We're going to have a hard time maintaining pricing. Will you at least temporarily lower prices and cut margins? So the winery did, Winesellers as an importer did, and we asked our distributor partners across the United States to do so as well, to try to either minimize or negate these tariffs. Now, on certain categories like our German estate wines, we already work at very, very small margins, and it just wasn't possible. So we had to raise pricing. What we were able to do also is reclassify some wines. So some of our red wines from Spain, we were able to adjust them upwards in terms of alcohol level. Yeah. And we could reclassify them into 14%. Some were actually already over 14%. They give you a little bit of leeway there. We're not doing anything fidgety, but if you were, you're within a half a degree or so, three quarters of a degree of alcohol, plus or minus, you're okay. So wines that were, 14.1%, we could come in at under 14%. And the advantage of that is a lower tax rate. But now, under these conditions, we want that to be coming in over 14%, so it wasn't tariff affected. Hope that makes sense. We also decided we did a lot of kegging. I mentioned in the beginning we do kegs and cans, and a lot of that kegging and canning takes place domestically. So we brought wines over in large bladders or larger formats, in flexi tanks. And then we bottle them here. So that would get around the tariff too. Then we could also possibly shift our product mix to other countries. Now that doesn't do our suppliers in the affected tariff countries any good, but it's an unfortunate consequence that we saw happen market-wide, where Italy saw their share of market increase because of tariffs on competition. And our other suppliers were saying, hey, that's a competitive advantage for us. You guys should be out there selling more of our wine. So that's what we were able to do. And a lot of other people were able to do is actually kind of shift some products where there might have been some serious price increases. Now, there were importers out there that specialize in French wine or European wine in general. And some of those guys just closed their doors. So this was really, really cataclysmic for a lot of people, and cost the U.S. economy a lot of money. There were numbers associated with it, and I don't want to kind of go down a path that's a little bit less positive and a little bit of guesstimation. But I include a link here in the end if you want to dig a little deeper about the effects of these tariffs. You can dig deeper on them. So
there may be effects of the tariffs, but isn't drinking way up during the COVID? Well, compensate your end.
Yeah, so that's another great thing to talk about here is drinking consumption in the United States of wine is up about 1%. So not dramatically up, but what we saw is all the shift from due to COVID, the shift from restaurant consumption to in-home consumption. So retail business went way up. We didn't, and it depends on what your distribution is as well. So per industry average, about 20% of volume goes through restaurants. I'm going to talk about COVID, I think, a little bit later, but 20% of wine volume goes through the through the restaurant channel, and 80% goes through retail. So when we lost on March 13th of last year, when we lost all our restaurant business, that would mean that retail sales would have to go up 22% to compensate for zero restaurant sales. Now, it went up in the beginning. We saw a lot of hoarding, and we saw it go up 23, 26% week over week, year to year. So we did see that compensate. But as the year wore on, we saw less of those numbers kind of dip. And I think last year, retail business was up somewhere around 18% for the wine sector. Restaurant business was down 80%. So that averages out to about maybe 1% growth. So it's really where you're consuming. Overall consumption hasn't changed, but man, the growth at retail was really pretty explosive. And I think that's what people focused on. And maybe like you and me, my drinking definitely increased during COVID, but overall about 1% in the US for wine.
I will attest to that hoarding thing. Yeah, I definitely started that at the beginning.
Yeah,
so do we, but we drank through all of it.
So yes, full disclosure, I have
If the
now
zombies
done.
come now, we're in trouble.
There we exactly.
And for an importer like me, I can talk specifically to my experience, but I think it's demonstrative of what other people went through, is that our business was about 40% on premise or restaurant business. So we would need to really compensate by 50% increases in retail to compensate for the volume loss. And it's not a realistic thing to do. Retail business was driven mostly during COVID through supermarkets and big box stores. And those guys are selling big national brands, the Kim Crawfords, the Stella Rosas, the Josh Cellars, those kind of brands. And that's not the stuff that I sell. I sell kind of finer wine, smaller brands, niche-y things, not supermarket brands. So those brands went boom. A lot of them showed 100% type of growth, which is just absurd. But when I don't sell through that channel as much, that really hurt, and it hurts finer wine type of people, and those fine wine people. That's where they sell is at restaurants. The sommelier in those restaurants are the friend of the fine wine. They're the people that take chances and pour stuff by the glass that you probably wouldn't see at Jewel. And so, and even if you were able to shift to maybe sell at Jewel or Mariano's, those guys, those big guys, they have requests for proposals, RFPs that are like 6 months out, and they all put holds on that kind of stuff. So every supermarket was just trying to put stuff back on the shelf. They're not interested in new items or new resets. So if you were already on the shelf there, you did great. But if you weren't, you didn't. So, yeah, I think that's a whole COVID conversation that is unfortunately tied into these tariffs. And there's a whole slide that I talk about the combination effects between COVID and tariffs was a double whammy. And we're going to see a triple whammy here later for our French producers, our friends in France, our vignerons in France. Yeah.
You bring up obviously one way you offset that is your kegging and canning.
Yeah.
How do you sell people on that? Right, the canning thing. Everything I've read, I've tried some. They're good, but it's hard because it's in a can.
Yeah. I think we're finding that the same kind of thing that took place with this thing that twisted off the top of your bottle, your Albarino. The screw cap conversation versus cork is the same type of thing that's happening here. It's consumer perception. And the vessel really is an inert vessel that we're talking about. Cans are lined. The liner keeps you from tasting the aluminum. So lined cans are just as good, if not a better form of transport for the wine than glass. It's also far more economical. Because shipping glass from France or Spain or any other country, a foreign country, or even domestically, glass weighs a lot, and we're paying to ship glass, and the carbon footprint from glass is bigger than a can. So there's a lot of compelling reasons, economically, environmentally, to move to cans, and really canned wine is only as good as the juice you put in it. So
you've seen a shift in the microbrews who used to have the growlers, and now almost all of them are canning.
Yeah,
and they sold it on it's better. It's better for the beer to keep
it's
it
better
dark.
for beer.
And cool. I would imagine the same is true for the wine. But I just think it's more of I don't know if it's a she thing of having a bottle or holding the bottle or presenting the bottle that has to be shifted. I think to get people to open up to canning because. Again, as you say, common sense, if it's a lined can, it's dark, it's cold, or room temperature, it's going to keep it better than a bottle you're trying to keep in a dark cellar. right?
Yeah, and the other thing is we're talking about when we talk about COVID, we saw occasion usage change. So whereas people aren't dining in restaurants, they're getting food to go. I mean, I saw restaurants doing a lot of to-go things, and restaurants were buying canned format to sell because they were smaller formats for individual meals, or even for safety and convenience. You know, when you're touching a bottle and you're pouring a glass, there's a lot of contact that's happening there. And the COVID risk is higher than if it's a single serve item and you brought it out to the table and opened it at the table, and then that's it. So there is a little safety issue that I saw restaurants move to, convenience factor, and then people were going outside. You can't go to restaurants, but you could go outside. So what's better to pack than a lightweight can? You fit the same amount of wine in a more compact vessel that weighs less, and you know you can just crack it open and have a picnic with a can of wine. So there's definitely occasion usage that shifted consumption habits during COVID too.
Lee, how long did it take for people to not think that a screw top was substandard?
Yeah, I still got people that's still kind of an older generation that turned their nose up at it.
Okay.
But I think it took a while, but I think alternative packaging is starting to people are opening their eyes to alternative packaging for, again, those environmental reasons. And once we kind of the wall breaks open and people are now consuming from screw caps and alternative things, I think it's going to be quicker than it took. It took a commitment by Australia and New Zealand. Almost all New Zealand product comes in screw cap, and they were the first advocates of it, and they took it on the nose, and they said, "Yep, we're going to do it. That's what we're going to do." And they really helped push that forward. It took a lot longer for maybe European wines to adopt it, but it's definitely better for the wine. There's a thing called corkage. That whole ceremony where they bring you the bottle, they open up the bottle, and they present the cork to you. That's to make sure that cork is sound. And there's a thing called TCA, which is a contaminant that happens in the process of pulling this natural product off a tree and then processing it and putting it in a bottle, and it can ruin the wine. And that spoilage, back in the day used to be around 5%. What consumer packaged goods company would ever use a packaging product that would spoil 5% of their product? Is just insanity.
Yeah.
Now we still experience corkage, but it's a lot less. Our technology of how we deal with cork and process cork's gotten a lot better. So corkage is a much smaller problem, but it was a compelling argument to move to screw cap back in the day.
So I've seen like mostly whites have screw caps. There are some reds. Is there anything to that, or is it just marketing?
No, I think that there is still a value to cork. And what cork is it's a semi-permeable sealant, and it allows a little bit of oxygen exchange. And you want a little bit of oxygen exchange for maybe fine red wines that will improve in the bottle. That improving in the bottle happens because of that limited amount of oxygen exchange. And our screw caps do not allow for any oxygen exchange. So screw caps are a perfect closure for anything that's supposed to be drunk young or fresh, which is like 98% of all wine sold in a supermarket is consumed in the first 48 hours of purchase. So, that's the kind of thing. So fine red wines, maybe you don't see that. They've actually developed a synthetic cork that they can exactly and precisely tell you how much oxygen exchange over what period of time. So you're seeing synthetic cork, a more predictable sealer than natural cork. Fun. We never know where these conversations go. So I enjoy the sidebars here. Good stuff. Well, that's about it on the kind of the reactions here. Let's taste the next wine, and then we'll move into the continued escalation of these tariffs. So we're going to go to Germany. How many people have a German Riesling Kabinett with them? I see a hand or two. The particular bottle that I picked, I think, is at Binny's in Niles. So please do stop by and get it if this entices you, or if you're interested in trying. Germany, we mentioned, is very far north. As a result, it's a cool climate. As a result of that, we're mostly white wine producers. Our producer, George Albrecht Schneider, is in a region called the Rheinhessen, one of the larger regions of Germany. Germany is about the 10th largest producer in the world. So, we think a lot about, at least I do, we think about Germany, we do think about wine. I guess a lot of people probably think about beer too. And good German beer for sure. But really, Riesling is home here. It's home, and we're going to try a classic German Riesling Cabernet on the off-dry side. So hopefully people have found something that fits that kind of category. You see here, obviously, because it's very far north, most of the growing region is in the southern part of the country and centered around bodies of water, mostly rivers. And these rivers act for a couple of things. They provide some reflectivity, so you get some reflection, some extra sunlight coming off of the water. The movement of the water also helps move air. Sometimes we get some cold air and frost. And serves a few other purposes, but it's centered around these rivers and tributaries of the Rhine. Here we're going to be right off the Rheinhessen on the southern branch coming out of Frankfurt. And we have some good pictures. So let's keep moving and take a look at some pictures of the family. So George Albrecht Schneider, a producer. There are only 14 generations. You see this a lot in Germany. After Napoleon freed up land purchases for private purchase, the Schneider family purchased just after 1800 property around the town of Nierstein. So this is 14 generations. The 15th generation are riding tractors and having fun as kids, but they'll probably be involved in the business too. So let's take a look. I have some nice pictures of the harvest from 1890. And the next picture is a harvest from 1969, my vintage.
Nice.
Not a lot's really changed here. And, the grapes haven't changed much. The terroir hasn't changed much. We have another one from more recently, 1989. And we can see some of the current generation there. So there's a lot of tradition here and a lot of years. There's 2009. Now you see the 15th generation there in the front.
Wow.
So they're replicating the kind of fun. This was a COVID harvest, unfortunately, and relegated to mostly family members. But it's a real family affair there. Let's move to the next slide, see what I've got up there. There's the family. And then the next slide. So yeah, we're going to drill down here. You can see in the top right corner where you are in Frankfurt, you can see the Rhine and Rheinhessen rivers. And if you're going to, that orange part, if you move down there, you're going to see the town of Nierstein, and that's what we're going to focus in on. I told you I was a map guy. So let's hit the next map. And we're going to talk about a vineyard site to the south of Nierstein called the Paterberg Vineyard Site. It is a single vineyard site where this wine hails from. And we're going to get into a little bit of German nomenclature. That word Cabernet is a quality designation that's reserved for wine, for grapes that reach a certain ripeness level. And because they're extra ripe grapes, they were held for special occasions and actually got their name because they were put in, guess where? A cabinet.
Cabinet.
Yes. So you're probably familiar with a term called Spätlese, which is the next level of ripeness, which literally translates as late harvest, Auslese, and it goes up from there, Baron Auslese, until you reach Trocken Baron Auslese and ice wine type of concentrations. But this is a fully ripened Riesling that has a little bit of residual sugar to it, and the residual sugar here is to offset some of the acidity that's naturally present in the Riesling grape, especially grown in a cool climate. So I think it shows nice balance. Everybody has their own opinion of what's sweet, what's dry, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. But this wine is really a perfect food pairing wine for me. Anything with cream sauces, and kind of like seafoods with cream sauces, fettuccine Alfredo with some chicken. I think the cream has some natural sugar to it, and the richness compared to the acidity of the wine is a perfect pairing. Obviously, people really like this with spicier food, but this wine has such subtlety that if you get too spicy, for me, you lose the subtlety of the wine. It doesn't do the wine any favors, but realistically, sweet wines with more spicy type of cuisine, Cajun or Indian or Szechuan or, Pan-Asian type of cuisine. But I think this would also go with some really soft cheeses. So I saw the box there with some soft cheeses. Try it before, try the wine before you try it with the cheese, and then try the wine with the cheese and see how the two interact, because I think it will change the wine dramatically and make it seem a lot less sweet.
Yeah, Lee, to your point, when I tasted this compared to the first one, it tastes sweeter but smoother. And it must be that acidity level that you were talking about with the sweetness. But like Alicia, I'm more of a red girl, but these were both something that I would break out.
Okay, and I just took a sip with habanero Gouda that I have. And that's good. So, yeah, with the spicy.
Yeah, the sweetness helps counterbalance some of that spiciness.
Yeah.
So you definitely have that interplay there.
Interesting.
Yeah. And for me, it's always this balance. The only reason there's any sugar in that wine to begin with is because of all that natural acidity. If you had this wine without any residual sugar in it, it would probably take the enamel off your teeth. So we're looking for some balance here. And I get really great complexity out of this wine. I get what I typically find is this lemon limey, very lime driven, key lime type of driven citrus flavor. But I also get this limestone minerality. And it's I think that juiciness, kind of peach, pear type flavor as well in there. Is speaking to Riesling that's grown on these limestone soils that's on the south side of Nierstein. So let's take a look at some pictures of Nierstein. This is taken from the north looking down. Oh, nope, we're still talking about the single vineyards around. So this is taken from the north looking back at Nierstein. And on the front side is this region called the Rottehang, which has iron-rich soils. So the soils are red from iron. Probably some sort of volcanic activity is where iron comes from. And then on the south side, on the other side of Nierstein, they have completely different soil type, which is limestone, probably from ocean sedimentary stuff that was there eons ago. So, and that's how much soil type can really differ. And if you taste the wines, the same style of wine from these two regions, you're going to taste very different profiles. I get more tropical fruit and richness out of the Rottehang, the red stuff in front of us. And then this limestone stuff gives me this lemon lime kind of profile to it, and that minerality that's underlying there. Anybody find the wine a little too sweet? You got to pair it up with the right food.
Cheese, good.
Yeah, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big sweet gal, but this doesn't seem too sweet to me.
Yeah, and what's nice about it, I think, is that it does have that acidity, which keeps it from being cloying. The idea is that you have that juiciness and the fruitiness up front, and maybe some of that residual sugar you're tasting. But when it finishes with that acidity and keeps it clean. So it's not cloying or lingering sweetness. It's really refreshing and cleans itself up on the finish.
Yeah, absolutely. When I sipped it before I had any food, it seems sweeter than after the food, and actually balanced nicely.
Yeah, I had a friend from India. He came and he visited, and he doesn't drink a lot of wine, but he was drinking wine when he was here, and we cooked together, and we cooked like Vindaloo level of spice, really spicy stuff, sweating buckets through the meal, and enjoying a Riesling Auslese, even much sweeter than this wine. And he said, hey, I don't know much about wine, but I really enjoyed that wine with the food. Can I try another glass of the wine? I poured him the glass of the wine. He said, well, what's this? I said, that's the wine we had with the meal. He said, no, it's not. I said, yes, it is. It is the same wine, but because that meal was so hot that it didn't seem as sweet. So, that's an extreme example of what food and wine pairings can do, but a real crystal clear example of what can happen, the interaction between the two.
So now I want Indian food. Thanks very much, Lee. So I am
Get takeout from your
curious.
favorite delivery place.
We could not find what you suggested. So do you know this one, and does it compare? Do you
Yeah,
know?
Dr. Lucen, sure.
Yeah.
He's a great producer, and I think that that's a really terrific example of Riesling Cabernet. And we're talking kind of the same realm. I think he's a Mosel producer. So the Mosel typically has maybe a little less generous fruit and even higher acidity. So I think all you're going to do is get a maybe more exaggerated kind of example of what we're talking about with that residual sugar and the acidity. But a terrific producer.
So when I make crazy spicy jambalaya, I should be serving Riesling with it?
Yeah, I think it's a nice pairing. And you don't have to go crazy. There's a lot of affordable Riesling out there that's very, very good. You don't have to spend, I think this is like an $18 bottle, $15, $16 bottle of wine. You can probably spend $10 and have a retail guy hopefully steer you into something. Riesling's not very expensive, and it doesn't have to be. I think we sell $10 Riesling. That's a terrific example that I drink with spicy food. I prefer to save something like this maybe for finer cuisine, maybe not quite as spicy, just because, again, I think it railroads the wine, ruins the nuance. But yeah, for sure. Riesling and Asian food.
Pam, what do you have?
What I'm holding up here.
This
So
wine.
this wine that he had suggested. So to his point, it was $18.99.
Okay. And just FYI, the wine guy at Benny's, boy, I can't remember his name right now. Maybe Dean. He is really good. Really good.
Yeah, Dean is one of their head wine buyers up there, manager, and he knows his stuff. So go see Benny's, and they have this wine there for you, and they can always special order anything that we're talking about here too.
Yeah, just a tip, if for those of us that can go during the day, that's the best time at Benny's, because if you try to get a wine guy on busy times of the week, you're not going to get that great service Alicia's talking about. They can really spend time with you if it's not busy.
Yeah, it's true. And they also, at least my Benny's in Lincoln Park, where I visit, I go to the Niles store sometimes too, full disclosure, but they're also really good on email too. So if you make contact, and they're very good with customer service, whether it's email or in person. So for sure. Let's go ahead and move on. I want to talk about kind of what's new in the discussion. So there's our wine there.
Keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay.
So we talked about COVID. I think we really covered a lot of this stuff. Yeah, I think we covered all this stuff and how it's bad news for fine wine and on-premise focused brands, meaning restaurant type brands. So tariffs combined with COVID is a double bounce, kind of that trampoline double bounce. It was really, really pretty disastrous. Our German estates really took a huge hit because we could not absorb that tariff, and our primary outlets for that was restaurants. So depending on what category of wine you're in, this COVID thing was a real disaster for the restaurants and restaurant-driven brands. Any questions about COVID before we move on? Because I think we really covered it.
Do you see a turnaround yet?
Yeah, March 13th was pretty much when people shut down. So my month-over-month last year numbers look pretty fantastic because last year, past month was close to zero.
Wow.
So yeah, there's definitely a turnaround, and not only because of vaccines and lower rates of COVID transmission, meaning restaurants are opening more, but even places that have still have 25 and 50% type capacity restrictions are opening up patios. So we're seeing life come back, and I think there's a lot of pent up latent demand. I'm ready to go out and enjoy somebody's patio or restaurant, raise a glass, not have to cook for myself, and party like it's the Roaring 20s. So yeah, I think we're seeing it ramp up, and we're definitely seeing purchase habits come back from the on-premise. Our next problem is getting our distributors who sell directly to the restaurants to stock up inventory to prepare for said Roaring 20s type purchase habits. And compounding that is just getting wine into the country. So we're going to see some supply chain issues probably rear their ugly heads, even with forward-thinking distributors and importers, just unable to get. We're experiencing a lot of out of stocks, which is uncommon for us because of the delays in the ports.
So my empty wine rack right now is not a good plan. I should start hoarding again.
No, I think depends on what you're drinking.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's hit the next slide, and we'll talk about kind of. Here's another great thing that happened to us. Foreign exchange rates. In early 2020, we were about almost at par, meaning $1.08 would buy you €1. We're buying as an importer, we're buying in euros and selling in dollars. So that foreign exchange rate really slid to the point where in January, and we'll talk about January 2021, it was a real bad month if you're an importer. Our foreign exchange rate on the spot market, if you weren't buying futures, you were buying on the spot market around 1.22, and then you get fees and whatnot added on top of that. And we're back down to a more realistic 1.2. But think about, an 18 to 17%, 16, over 15% increase in cost just because of foreign exchange rates. So what that did was really, really further eroded our margins, or we had to take a price increase. And so my job, as they call me the margin master at Winesellers, my job at Winesellers became very complicated to try to figure out what margin was on every item, and what we were paying for it, and what we were paying for currency at the time of purchase. So that was another aggravating factor to the tariffs was foreign exchange rates slid in the wrong direction for us. Next slide. We'll get to some good news, I promise, but a little bit more bad news. In October of 2020, the WTO sides with Europe and says, yeah, you can impose $4 billion worth of U.S. goods coming in. And that really hit, in the beverage alcohol industry, it hit whiskey hard. And other goods too, but I'm a beverage alcohol guy at heart. That's my business, and the whiskey business really took a slam. And then it further got, and I told you I'd talk about January 2021. The USA decided that we weren't actually capturing $7.5 billion worth of tariffs. So they expanded tariffs, and it slammed the wine industry pretty bad because now it encompassed all wine other than sparkling wine. So we could we had containers on the water with flexi tanks in there, formats larger than 2 liters, that weren't going to experience tariffs, that when they landed, they did. So planning got destroyed, and your your pricing was not what you needed to be. It's really difficult when you're talking about a business that needs to plan out 6 months or more to plan for price increases. It's really disastrous. So all of a sudden, everything went up, and my margin master and repricing efforts we had to comb through everything again, figure out where we were with pricing and reprice stuff. The good news is that we knew with the Biden administration coming in that they were going to appoint a new U.S. trade representative, and that person would probably be a little bit less damaging than the Trump administration, their stance. And we actually saw here in March, the two sides came together and they said, let's suspend tariffs. And they suspended tariffs for 4 months. So my job got real complicated, this time for the good, in order to reprice all the items coming in on direct import, and then start working on our warehouse and figuring out when we can lower pricing there. So all these goods now will eventually work their way in through the supply chain with no tariff. The question mark remains what will happen in July of 2021 when the 4-month hiatus on tariffs are no longer valid. We hope to see these tariffs go away permanently. And we saw good news today. I just read an article about an hour before we came live here that said that the European Trade Commissioner had suggested that they extend 6 months rather than a 4-month window, because that will give more time for us to come to a rational decision, as well as people involved in the affected industries to be able to work on a more predictable basis. So that's some good news, I think. But we're still not sure where this will shake out. But we think that with the USTR and the Biden administration and the EU really seeing a kind of de-escalation of the standoff here and more friendly terms otherwise, including NATO and other trade, that these will go away and won't the tariffs will go away. That was really kind of a Trumpism. You do to me, I do to you, and generally I do to you before you do to me. So we'll see what happens with China. I don't know how many people out there are importing stuff from China, but that's still going to remain a contentious thing. And we'll see where that shakes out. But I think that we'll see these European tariffs. Probably, I'm 80% sure that we'll see them go away permanently.
Hopefully more of the current leadership drink wine, right?
Yeah, I saw a real mobilization in a very fragmented industry, in the wine industry, come together and try to affect legislation by trying to lobby, and not with lobbyists, but by independently pulling together and lobbying DC for attention to this matter. So it was really, really good to see something that is a really fragmented industry. You know, how many labels do you look at on a wine shelf? Even I scratch my head when I'm looking down a wine shelf. There's so many producers out there, but there was a real good response in the industry. So that was
from a healthcare standpoint, you know, it's medicinal actually for your long-term macular health. Have a little red wine every day if your doctor doesn't. Your general doctor, cardiologist say it's okay. So we're totally on that.
Yeah, the polyphenols in red wine are supposed to be good for you, as well as just alcohol in general to a certain degree is good for you. It helps keep your vascular system open and running brightly and keeps it from accumulating platelets, as do but especially red wine, there's polyphenols that they think help reduce.
It's the resveratrol, which is anti-inflammatory for all our cells, especially the Pinot grape.
Yeah, so we can jump into that anytime we want. Maybe we could do a whole thing on that. But yeah, red wine good for you. Wine in general good for you. Beverage alcohol in moderation good for you. And also, there's a mental health aspect here where some people do have some level of dependency, and to take this away, we were considered part of the essential food and wine chains, food and beverage industry, in the wine industry, and part of the rationale was simply mental health. Not only physical health and rational thinking, but mental health issues as well. So I know I'd lose my mind if I couldn't get wine. So speaking of wine, let's taste the next wine. I know there's a couple people that aren't really white wine drinkers. We do have a red wine. We're picking our third country. So we hit Spain, we hit Germany. We'll go to France. So, the home for Pinot Noir, for me, these are all indigenous varieties. So I kind of picked indigenous varieties from each country. We're going to talk about Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir, mostly we think about Mecca as being Burgundy, and that's kind of where that variety started. Pinot Noir is Burgundian. Chardonnay, it comes from Burgundy as well. But Pinot Noir is grown all over the world. The USA is the number 2 largest producer. Germany is number 3, surprisingly. And it's not just grown in Burgundy, in France, but it's grown in the Languedoc as well. So the Languedoc is down the Mediterranean side. You can see it in the orange in the bottom left there. And we're going to go to a region called Limoux. And Limoux is known mostly for sparkling wine because it's high altitude away from the Mediterranean and has limestone soils. So cooler climate and limestone soils sounds like Burgundy, so they grow Pinot Noir there too. So it's really the best place to grow Pinot Noir in the south of France. I think I have some pictures here that we can probably get to. Oh yeah, before we taste the wine, I wanted to talk about the frost in France. So pour yourself some Pinot Noir. and get ready to hear a sob story here for France. It is highly unfortunate. So April frosts in France are not uncommon. This was a particularly bad one that went on for days, not just a singular one-time event, but what they call black frost, meaning a real winter frost. Now, it's pretty common that it happens in April, maybe not this extreme, maybe not this late, but there's a combined effect here that's happening because of global climate change, that winters are becoming less severe. We're having warmer March and April temperatures, which means that the vines come out of dormancy. And when they come out of dormancy, they're especially fragile. These green shoots that come out are extremely fragile and sensitive to freezing temperatures. And you can see the vine that's on the top, that where it looks like it's dead foliage. That's dead foliage. It froze solid, and it broke the cell walls and destroyed the grapevine. Now, this is bad, and it's especially bad because of what I mentioned, global climate change and more moderate temperatures during the winter and warmer springs, because the vines come out when they think it's warm. So the vines are coming out early, particularly Chardonnay is an early budding variety. So places in France that had bad frost that are heavy Chardonnay producers were most affected. So here you see Chablis and Champagne, a lot of Chardonnay going there. Also very marginal climates. So these got particularly hit with very bad frost, lost predicted 80 to 90% of their production for this year because of the frost. You go down the line, you can see the Loire 40 to 50%, Burgundy 50 to 60%, the Rhone pretty far south, 40 to 50%, the Languedoc also pretty far south, pretty Mediterranean climate, 30 to 40%, and then the Southwest, another 40 to 50%. This is tragic losses for a region that's dealing with COVID, foreign exchange currencies, and tariffs. So I just wanted to talk about that there. You can see the pictures of what people try to do to try to keep the temperatures from going below about 28 degrees Fahrenheit is where, for an extended period of time, is where you really start experiencing some problems. So they light burners in the fields, in the vineyards. This tries to affect it just a degree or two, can make the difference between a loss of a crop or not. They also use sprinkler systems, and when spray water onto the vines, it freezes, and that snap actually protects the vines. It changes the internal temperature because of the change of state from water to solid, actually protects the vines. So that's one way that they can protect the vines. Another way is actually move air, but there was really no air that wasn't cold. Like if you're on a hillside, hopefully the cold air slides down and doesn't affect your vineyard too much. It was just cold air everywhere. So that wasn't really effective, but those are some things that you can do. You see what they call smudge pots here on the bottom right. It's pretty, but you don't want to have to see it. All right, let's talk about
how immediately will that impact French wine prices?
Oh yeah, yes.
Immediately?
Not immediately, but you're starting to see producers move and try to buy wine that are maybe already on the open market. Look to buy grapes from last year that might still be on the market, or buy juice that's already on the market, buy wines that may already be produced. So there are people that are trying to shift, knowing that they're going to lose production. So yeah, it's going to affect prices. Has it affected prices yet? No. When will we see prices be affected? Probably before this vintage comes out, because people will try to stretch the previous vintage 2019, as far as they can. And the one way that they can do that is raise prices and decrease demand. So they spread it out. And maybe work on a shorter 2020 vintage and try to get to 2021 as quick as possible. So yeah, you'll see prices affected for French wine and Champagne for sure. Chablis probably worse than even Champagne. Burgundy for sure. Yeah. So look to buy into maybe 2019s if those are areas that you like. I think Champagne will be able to absorb a lot of it because they work on basically a lot of non-vintage type of stuff. So they have wine in the cellar that they blend together, in order to create a more consistent product. So they're not as vintage dependent as maybe Chablis, Burgundy, and these other regions. So some Pinot Noir, not as badly as affected because it buds a little bit later than Chardonnay. So these Chardonnay vines that came out early, they were the ones that really got smacked around the worst. Pinot Noir, little later budding, producing a medium-bodied red full of hopefully red fruit. What I like about Pinot Noir is the complexities that Pinot Noir gives us, the elegance that it gives us. It doesn't have to beat you over the head to say, I'm a very good quality wine. It's not the most extracted thing. It shouldn't be the most oaked thing. So if you're into big, oaky, juicy, full-bodied reds, this may not be it for you, but this is my style of wine, something that shows elegance, finesse, has lovely balance, and complexities beyond the red fruit of maybe some mushroom, some earth, some black tea typically. So let's see what we taste in our Les Charmel Languedoc Rosé Pinot Noir. Another screw cap, by the way.
It's tasty.
You know, and these wines will develop some earthy complexities, maybe some spice notes as they age too. So Pinot Noir is an ultimately aging wine, and the best Pinot Noirs you probably will find under cork rather than screw cap, because they are meant to age, and a little bit of oxygen does them good in the long run. Come on, guys, a little bit of wine. Let's chat.
Yeah, so this is pretty tasty. We a couple years ago did our first trip to Oregon. I had been intrigued by their Pinots, and had only been to California wine country prior to that when we went out west. So to your point, that they range in complexity, and we found I like to age my Pinots a little bit more so because I like that more bolder flavor. So I like them. They age a little longer.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Oregon Pinot Noir. I haven't been out to, so I'm a little jealous. I haven't been out to Oregon wine country in a while. I'm overdue for a visit, but my cellar is packed full of them. And I won't mention specific producers because I don't sell them, but I like my finer Oregon wines at about 5 to 7 years old. That's generally my drinking window for them. Here we're, let's see, I'm at 2018 on our Les Charmel. And I'm getting plenty of earthy complexities. Do you have the Les Charmel there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, I get that kind of earthy complexity to it, and maybe a little bit of that clove, cinnamon spice as well.
Cinnamon, yeah.
Well, the price point on this is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's hard to find good Pinot Noir. One is it only grows in very specific areas. It's a very finicky grape. What's the Pinot Noir you have down there?
Steve, I love drawing.
I see Cotonou Village. It's a French Burgundian Pinot Noir.
Yes.
Yeah, and who's the producer? Does it say Drouin?
Yeah, Druid.
Yeah, that's a large negociant down there, and they produce very quality, consistent wine. So another good Pinot Noir, probably a little bit more expensive than our $13 suggested retail on the Les Charmel, and maybe a little leaner, and maybe more red fruited and not quite, and maybe a little higher acid than this particular wine. This, for me, this is almost, if I tasted this, I would probably tell you it would be an affordable Oregon Pinot Noir. It has a little bit more ripeness than Burgundy here that we're tasting at the Les Charmel. And I think it's a function of, you can see the picture of Limoux there. I think it's either the yellow or the purple that's inland.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, so that's pretty far inland and pretty high altitude. You're talking about Pyrenees, the entry of the Pyrenees there. So you're high altitude and cool temperatures. I think I might even have a cool picture. So let's take a look at the picture.
So Lee and Pam, since I have a daughter that might be heading to Oregon, where is wine country in Oregon?
So wine country in Oregon, you would fly into
Portland.
It's tough. It's a way to get there.
It's a little further inland from the coast. So you fly into Portland, and it's an hour drive.
And then it was most of the wineries, they were a little bit of a trek, but totally worth it.
I found it a lot different. It's younger. It's growing. It feels like it's new. Where there's established and community already built into Napa and Sonoma. Where this has so much. Again, you see fresh vines. You see new vineyards growing up, as well as the traditional ones who've been up there for years. So they're have both built. The other thing about Portland I found was that they built the experience of the wine visit first, where the California wineries added it. That was after, I think, somehow they thought about the value of it. And some of the wine experiences we have in Portland or in, what's the name of the town? Willamette Valley. Were just phenomenal. The experience was phenomenal. The wine was great. The Pinots were great. And they were, again, just a great experience. So, again, if you want to talk to us after this, we have a place to go. We stayed in the middle of about 500 acres of grapes. Not another house around us. It was just phenomenal experience to start out from there every day.
We will absolutely be reaching out to you.
Was that Willamette Valley Vineyards?
No.
No, we went to Lemelson. We were in that region. Ponzi.
Elk Cove. Again, funny, they have the first guy I went to, the last guy, Ponzi, he invented the teacups at Disneyland in '72. He was one of the engineers with Disney. He then left that year to say, I'm going to go up to Oregon and do this. And so he's one of the original 5, I guess, that are what have built the Oregon wine growth. And 25, 30 others will say they're number 6. We're the 6th vineyard up here, but Ponzi's one of the original 5 that, again, owns it. And it's now run by women. His daughters run it. And it's a phenomenal estate. Just a beautiful, well-run, stunningly beautiful experience. So.
Yeah, and you should be able to find those wines if you want to visit without visiting. Put it in your glass. You should find those wines at Binny's too.
Right.
Excellent.
Yeah, I love those Oregon wines and belong to several cellar clubs and agree with you that the experience is more genuine than maybe these kind of like eno-tourism monstrosities that Napa kind of provides. Yeah, more honest and authentic.
Good to know.
Honest and authentic here is our friend Laurent. He's the guy that actually gave me these estimations on the previous page about the frost affected. He's a Burgundian producer. So he makes Pinot Noir and Burgundy, and he bought an estate with 15 hectares of vines. It's about 37, almost 40 acres, in a winery in Limoux, because he believes in the terroir there is similar enough to Burgundy to produce great Pinot Noir. So we have a Burgundian making the Les Charmel, and he's a real authentic guy, great winemaker. Let's hit the next slide.
And I like his glasses.
Yeah, he's a fashionable guy too. He's been in the wine industry. He's one of the guys that actually made some money in the wine industry. So he can afford some good fashion here. These are the rolling kind of, you're looking out at the high altitude plateaus here in the pre-Pyrenees. But these are actually the vines that the Les Charmel comes from.
Nice.
I think you get a sense of the altitude there. And in true Burgundian fashion, they use these large inert oak open top or semi-open top vessels for fermentation. Very Burgundian production method here. And let's see what else we have here. Yes, there's our Les Charmel Pinot Noir. So I think this thing is, the classic pairings with this is in Oregon. Hopefully you were able to experience their salmon and Pinot Noir.
Yes.
Classic pairing, and they smoke this. The traditional indigenous peoples would smoke the salmon over an open fire, and that with some Oregon Pinot Noir is about as good as it gets in wine country.
Absolutely.
Okay. Smoked salmon.
Smoked salmon, fresh salmon, a classic pairing. Duck for Pinot Noir is fantastic too. Maybe that's a little bit, Canard is a little bit more French style. But medium soft cheeses. Hopefully our friends eating cheese are enjoying this with it as well. But for me, Pinot Noir is super versatile. I have Pinot Noir with a wide array of things, anywhere from as rich as maybe filet, a leaner cut of red meat, down to delicate things like salmon. I really like it with poultry. The more complex the wine, so if you're drinking those good Oregon Pinot Noirs, I like the simple kind of meal to pair with it because I don't want complex flavors messing with my other complex flavors. So I keep it simple. So when I drink fine wine, whether it's Bordeaux or Oregon Pinot Noir or Burgundian Pinot Noir or really anything, even white wines, I backdrop it against very simple things like baked chicken. That's what I like to do. Keep it simple on the food side and let the wine do all its singing.
So because Lee mentioned duck, I have to give a little commercial for Graziano's in Niles. If you ever happen there when Steve is making his wood roasted duck, you have to order it because it's amazing.
Yeah,
I have a Pinot with it.
Yeah, get a Pinot. I'm sure they have an Italian focused list, and if you can afford it, I go with an aged Barolo or maybe a nice Chianti Reserva is where I'd go with that. But I tend to pair our medium intense flavors and foods with medium intense wines. And here you get Pinot Noir that is a medium, from medium minus to medium plus type of intensity wine and body wine. So really, really versatile type of wine for sure.
Hey, Miranda and Jenny, you guys look like you have a good food spread there. What are you guys eating?
We just put together a little cheese and spread board beforehand. So we had some soft cheeses and some cheddars and some kind of spicy spreads. So we've been experimenting with what pairs well together.
Oh, nice. Because I don't know where you live, but we can come over anytime.
We're a little far away. We're up in the Twin Cities in Minnesota.
Oh, okay. No, we're not going.
We met up with Mom last weekend, and she got us the wines we needed.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And they are the ones heading out to Oregon soon, hopefully.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, yeah. Please tap into us personally because we can give you some great tips.
Lee, are you the buyer for all the wines in your business?
I am one of the decision makers. There's probably a good handful of decision makers, but yeah, one of my responsibilities is to kind of take lead and work with, potentially interface with new suppliers. So we're always on the lookout for good wines and good value.
Thousands upon thousands of vineyards. How do you pick them? How do you?
Well,
right? I mean,
you start with trying not to conflict with anything that's already in the portfolio. So we try not to be too redundant. And then it's like it goes, the decision tree spreads out into 1,000 branches from there. We're, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're a market-driven company, so we're always got our ear to the ground, either with general consumption habits, or what our wholesalers need. So we're filling supply chain holes. So recently we pulled in 2 new wines. One wine that hasn't launched yet is a low alcohol wine. So we have a reduced alcohol wine. There's a wellness trend or better for you type trend out there. And you're going to see this space fill up with a lot of wine with either no alcohol or lower alcohol. Kendall Jackson just announced a lower alcohol Chardonnay to pair up with their Vintners Reserve. And it's lower alcohol in it because it has less alcohol. It has less calories. There's a less calorie selling proposition with it too. So there's one general trend that we're on as well. And then another one is our distributor in Florida called Winebow has a portfolio. We're one of many suppliers, and one of their suppliers left to go to another wholesaler, and that's where they got most of their Sancerre. And they came to us and they said, "Hey, we know you guys are agile and have your hands in a lot of different places. Can you find us a Sancerre to replace this?" And sure enough, we have contacts everywhere, and we have a Loire Valley-based friend that brings us other wine. And we were able to work with a co-op to produce a Sancerre for them, and that's about to hit the market. And we're going to bring that broad market because they're going to sell like several thousand cases in Florida alone. So it's worth us to launch nationally, and it's a hole in our portfolio, and it's a real category. A lot of people still drink Sancerre. So Hopefully they weren't too badly affected by the frost, but that's two examples of where we've launched new products recently, one market-driven and one kind of supply chain-driven. But we're always on the lookout to kind of like find the next best thing. We don't mind kind of being ahead of the trend. We were one of the first importers to bring in wines from Argentina. Most people thought we were crazy to bring in Argentine wine back in the, I want to say it was the 80s. 86, I think we started working with Santa Julia. And, Argentine wine was all consumed domestically. They exported nothing. And the only other exporter there was Catena trying to sell wine here. And then Malbec took hold, and all of a sudden we were ahead of the trend. We knew Argentina was the 5th largest producer in the world, but didn't export much. And we said we just got along with the supplier and saw opportunity, and we were there. What's the next?
I love Argentine wine.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I was there in 1989, 1990, and was blown away because I knew nothing about it my first time to South America, and yeah, awesome wines and affordable.
Yeah. I did a Zuccardi virtual tasting last night. All the wines were suggested retail at $20, and they are just phenomenal examples, and not only phenomenal examples of the variety, but unique wines that you can't get. You couldn't produce if you tried anywhere else. Wines with identity, which are the things that excite me the most. It's come so far. It's come so far in Argentina and a lot of other places too. Oregon included, California included. I mean, what you were drinking from them in 1989 is different than what you're drinking today from them. And Alicia, please share my email address with anybody that's interested in visiting Oregon or Mendoza, Argentina, or any place that we do business. Take a look at our website, winesellersltd.com, to see where we're importing from. But it's 13 different countries. So if you're going to wine country, we can probably help you out and get you a little VIP treatment at one of our wineries, or at the very least, personal recommendations on where to go and who to see.
There you go. We will do that.
Do you have a lot of domestic wines in your portfolio?
We have some. We don't have a ton. We work with a producer in Santa Barbara, actually 2 producers in Santa Barbara Winery and Lafon Vineyards, making great Chardonnay and Pinot Noir amongst those are the main varieties that we work with. And then we work in California with a producer called Wineseller. They make wine from throughout California, from Napa, Clarksburg, down to Paso. Terrific winemakers making wine. We used to represent Bethel Heights from Oregon, but we sell. Actually, we came out with a brand called Kin and Cascade. We also know so many producers that we do what we call negotiant wines, which are wines that we put in our own labels. So we have a brand called Tortoise Creek, and we source those wines with wineries and consulting winemakers in California. And we also have a brand that's an Oregon-Washington crossover called Kin and Cascadia. And we do a Washington State Cabernet and an Oregon Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. So yeah, we have some USA representation in the portfolio as well.
Nice. Well, I think we are getting to the end here, right, Lee?
Yeah, I just wanted to, anybody that wants to dig a little deeper into, they want to get even drier, or they're having so much fun because the wine is so good, and they want to watch some more on the European Union and U.S. dispute. There was a round robin panel that is on demand. You can get it here at vinexponewyork.com. The URL is there. You could probably also Google it and get it too, but it's about an hour or so, an hour and 2 minutes of industry professionals talking about the tariffs and what it's done to the wine industry. And this is an ever evolving thing. As I mentioned, news today, hopefully we'll see 2 more months of suspension, and before July, certainly we hope to see them completely eliminated and a settlement with Boeing and Airbus. And I think my information is there, so anybody that inquires, certainly feel free to reach out. You can send it to info@Winesellers, or my name is RLS, specifically at winesellersltd.com. Feel free to drop me a line, and we can continue that. There's my contact information there on the last slide.
On this one? Okay, there we go.
So thanks everybody for joining today. Hopefully we learned a little bit about some macroeconomic effects of trade policy, and tasted a little bit of good wine along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lee.
Lee, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Hopefully, Alicia, we can taste some more wine with our friends again soon.
Sounds like a good plan. Have a good night.
Cheers. Happy